Healthcare is too expensive. Employers are offsetting costs onto their employees. Who will make health benefits affordable for hardworking Americans and their families? You will. This is the Empowering Plans Podcast, a show dedicated to helping you once again emphasize the benefit in benefit plan. Now prepare to learn, plan, save, and protect with the Phia Group.
Hello, and welcome to the latest iteration of the Phia Group's podcast, Empowering Plans. Today, Cindy Merrell and I, John Jablon, will talk a little bit about artificial intelligence. We know that that's a hot topic for everybody, and we wanted to tie it back to the healthcare field. And specifically, we're going to talk a lot about subrogation today. And subrogation is not a topic that people typically think of as sexy in the industry, right? There's so much stuff going on, and subro is one of the cornerstones. Doesn't get a whole lot of press, but with artificial intelligence, we think that there's a lot of relevance between that and subrogation. We talk a lot about how our consulting department is going to benefit from artificial intelligence. And in fact, we're actively working on some solutions in that regard. But what nobody's been talking about is how it can really help with subrogation. So I was hoping that Cindy could provide some awesome insight from her life in the subro world. And we want to talk about what's next in the industry. So Cindy, thanks so much for doing this with me.
Thanks, John. I want to just say how I'm excited to have this conversation with you today because you're right. Subrogation has not really been in the same sentence as all the chat about Chat GPT and artificial intelligence. So it is relevant, and I am excited about this new tool that is coming out at any point in time. I think that we are going to start seeing some additional benefits of that AI.
Definitely. And, I think a great place to start might be to just give a quick refresher, not on what subro is necessarily, but sort of why it's so important. Because a lot of people take it for granted, right? A lot of people just think, yeah, part of a health plan is subrogation, sure. But I think that when we talk about AI and the functions that it could play and the roles and all the interactions and touch points, I think it's important to remember what the main purpose is, and I think that that'll provide some good context. So Cindy, can you just go into a little bit, why is subrogation so important?
Well, subrogation is an amazing cost containment tool because what happens, just as a refresher, when a third party causes a plan member injury, that could be typically through a motor vehicle wreck or a slip and fall or a medical malpractice claim, we are looking to pursue any sources of recovery that are applicable to that loss. So, for instance, the most classic example of subrogation is one of the plan members is injured as a result of a motor vehicle wreck, and then we're pursuing all of the different sources of recovery, typically through auto insurance, and we are trying to get those funds back to the health plan because they are not the responsible party in that instance, typically.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think one of the things that we have to stress sometimes when talking to members, and correct me if this is wrong, but I did subro briefly when I started working here. And just as some quick backstory, I've been at Phia for a decade now, or in 2 weeks it will be a decade, and that blows my mind. But I started at a time when our CEO, Adam Russo, had all the new attorneys do a little bit of everything to see where we shined. And I will just say that subro is not where I shined. But I do remember it a bit, and I know that part of it is that health plan benefits are not designed to be a windfall for plan members, right? I mean, when people get settlements in court, they might think, oh man, I have all this cash now. This is amazing. That is how the media often portrays it. That is how it looks in TV and movies, right? When people file lawsuits, suddenly they're just rich beyond their wildest dreams because of a lawsuit. Yes. It's not how it's designed to work, or at least to an extent, right? It's not how it's designed to work from the health plan's perspective. When a health plan pays benefits, and then you basically get those benefits back from the responsible party, it's understandable that the health plan will say, well, look, we weren't just giving you a gift. We were paying for these injuries, but then someone else also paid for these injuries, which is why a lot of people view subro as sort of an extension of coordination of benefits. And it's a little bit weird and nebulous to think of it that way. But at its core, that's always how I've envisioned it. So when there is another party responsible and when that money is available, right, when that money actually goes into a plan member's pocket, it's coordination of benefits, Right? Does that sound about right, Cindy?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it, and that is accurate.
Fantastic. I love being accurate. It happens once in a blue moon. So back to AI. I know that we just gave some introduction into subrogation, and there are a lot of people listening who will say, yeah, I know all that. Can you move on to the exciting stuff? Yes, we will do that. The role of AI in identifying potential subro cases is limitless. There's a lot of pattern matching involved. I mean, there's a lot of human touch points that also come into play. But Cindy, what do you think about how a computer, how AI could identify cases? When you hear that, what do you think?
Well, someone once told me that in Subro, you have to think of it, this whole process starting from a upside down triangle, so a funnel. And that funnel is where we're doing data scrubs and we're looking for diagnosis codes that match, that say MVA, that may indicate that there could potentially be an opportunity for the plan to pursue subrogation reimbursement, or also coordinate benefits, as you had just acutely pointed that out. So what I am excited about is we are already doing a lot of data scrubbing, but I think that AI can just make it quicker and more user friendly, and that may lead to more opportunities for subrogation and reimbursement for the plans.
That makes a lot of sense. And when we had talked about this previously, you had mentioned the idea that medical malpractice might be sort of an exception to where AI might be able to shine. Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Sure. So in your traditional motor vehicle wreck situation, you're going to have a diagnosis code typically indicating that there was a motor vehicle wreck. There is not, that I am aware of, typically a medical malpractice diagnosis that makes it easier for us to identify. So that may be a limitation of AI on the front end, but what I was considering is if there were a pattern, if it could identify a pattern of remedial treatment after the surgery date, I think that could be something that may be able to indicate that there's a possibility that something didn't go right in that surgery. Now, does that always indicate that there was a medical malpractice? No, but it may give us an opportunity to start identifying more opportunities of subrogation and medical malpractice claims.
When you said that, it made me think of how funny it would be if they would add a diagnosis code for result of medical malpractice. I mean, can you imagine? That would just be hilarious. But yes, it would definitely make it a little bit easier to identify a case based on that. So this is all great stuff, Cindy. And if we could segue a bit, or maybe it's backing up, humans have a very big part in identifying cases. And you've been talking a little bit about that. But there's got to be something to be said for experience and intuition, right? Which AI sort of, I mean, I guess it could have experience, but intuition and judgment, those are a little bit tough for AI, right? So can you tell us anything about the importance of oversight or judgment or experience, and how that might not be fully solved by an AI?
Sure. So, one of my prime examples in this situation is sometimes we have plan participants who may mention that to their employer that this is typically in medical malpractice, that they are unhappy with the result of a surgery, which then required some sort of a revision surgery. But like we had talked about just a moment ago, it's hard to identify those. And the human element in this situation is we are great communicators typically. And if someone tells their employer, I'm having complication as a result of this surgery, that employer could let us know that there is a potential that the medical malpractice occurred, and then we can be on the lookout for any subrogation and or reimbursement opportunities if that member does end up pursuing. Another element of the human element or the human touch to this that AI might have a difficult time with is more of the situation where the human element is they know that Joe was injured as a result of a motor vehicle wreck, but he was the one who was at fault, and they know that. And it helps us when plans communicate with us to let us know what they know, if they find out about any opportunities, or if we have a case that's open, and they can just let us know that that is not a case in which we are going to pursue.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. So I think it makes sense to transition away from identifying cases and start talking more about handling cases, because I think that that is probably more relevant to what people typically think of when they think of AI, right? They're not necessarily thinking of identifying things. They're thinking of doing stuff, right? Making the AI work for them and do all the substantive stuff that might be difficult for people to do, right? Or time consuming. So legal interpretation is something that AI currently does not do a fantastic job at. And I'll give you an example here. A couple of months ago, I was doing some research for a particular consulting project, and I decided to see what AI had to say on the matter. I knew my answer, but I wanted to see if AI's answer could mirror it, and specifically ChatGPT, right? That's the popular one nowadays. That's the one that everybody's using and talking about, mainly because it's generally free for public use, and it's pretty cool to play around with, nice and easy. So one of the first questions I asked was just, quote from a court case saying that an ERISA plan cannot apply an illegal acts exclusion unless there is an element of causation, even if the plan language explicitly says causation is not required. So, sorry, let me boil that down a bit. Basically, what I'm saying is if the plan has an illegal acts exclusion, find me a court case that says that the illegal acts exclusion has to have actually caused the injury, or else it would be unenforceable. And to my surprise, ChatGPT came out and said, and I'll quote just for a bit, one example of a court case that addresses the issue of causation and illegal acts exclusions in ERISA plans is the case of Etline v. Methodist Hospital, and it's a case from the Third Circuit Court of Appeals in 2004. It gave me quotes. It gave me, paraphrasings from the case. I mean, it really went into detail on this case. And I was amazed, and I was thinking, oh my goodness, this is the future of our jobs, and I am replaceable. But then I looked up the case, and I think you'll figure out what happened, because my next message to ChatGPT was, that case doesn't exist. It literally didn't exist. I searched for the names. I searched for the quotes. I mean, I dug deep to find this case. It is not a case. It did not exist. It was completely what they call hallucinated, which is terrifying. I mean, it's a little bit, it gives me a little relief, because I realize that I am, in fact, not quite yet replaceable. But oh man. So
yes, I have to touch base on that. When you had shared that experience and that response from them, I think that was terrifying to see that it's creating case law. And I believe that there are currently lawyers across the country who tried to do something similar, and they are facing sanctions because these cases do not exist.
It is unbelievable. I've been wondering how many first-year associate attorneys are going to lose their jobs because they rely on ChatGPT for their research without checking the sources. Oh man, so strange, right? I mean, it doesn't make sense. I feel like if you don't know the answer, just say you don't know. There's so many things that ChatGPT will answer, I don't know. I don't have access to that information, or I don't know the answer. But with this, not only was it like, oh yeah, I know the answer, but it just made it up blatantly. And then it said, I apologize for the confusion. It appears that I mistakenly cited the incorrect case in my previous response. And then it went on and said, the correct case that holds this is, and then it listed another one. And luckily, that case did exist. But what I wrote to ChatGPT was, that case doesn't talk about ERISA health plans at all. And then it responded, you are correct, and I apologize for my error in citing the incorrect case. I'm not going to keep quoting here, but I think you kind of get the pattern. It just went on and on and on with, oh, sorry, here it is. And I said, nope. And it said, oh, right, you're right, here it is. And I said, nope. It's crazy, crazy stuff.
If only that would work in front of a court. We could just come up with it out of thin air. But unfortunately, we cannot.
Yeah, you keep citing cases till you find the right one. And finally, the judge says, oh, you're right, that does apply. Oh, man, amazing. Luckily, I had all day to just keep feeding it questions. But that brings me to my point of legal interpretations and even the more basic legal research, right? I mean, interpretation is one thing, but research is, you would think, much simpler. You would think that research would be the easy part and interpretation would be more difficult. But apparently research is the hard part, which baffles me. But anyway, legal interpretation is so important in Subro because statutory law and case law only take us so far. And Cindy, when we talked about this, you gave me the example of something called the collateral source rule. And I'm wondering if you want to elaborate on that just to talk about sort of interpretation and how research is not quite as cut and dry as even it might seem to be.
Sure. So this is, I don't want to go too far down in the weeds with the legal concepts, but basically, most states have a statute that specifically references what their stance is on subrogation and reimbursement. Either they prohibit subrogation and they allow reimbursement, or there's a lot of different combinations throughout this country. But there are some statutes that are going to be outside of the subrogation and reimbursement work coordination and benefits statutes, and they can be found sometimes in rules of evidence, or sometimes they're talking about different damages that the defendant and or the plaintiff can present to the jury. So there is a concept called the collateral source rule, and it means something different in each state. But there can be situations where some states have a collateral source that prohibits medical expenses from being presented to a jury. And what the actual impact of that is we have trouble pursuing medical expenses from an award that medical expenses were not considered at all in the settlement amount. So my concern is I'm not sure that ChatGPT can take all of those different nuanced statutes and kind of bring them together and find out the impact that each statute may have upon the other.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, there's all sorts of creative ways to interpret the law. And, one of the reasons that I love Phia so much is because we are very honest with our clients. I'm not going to sit here and tell all our listeners that only Phia can do your subrogation. It's just not the case, right? Anyone can do subro. But where Phia really shines is our people skills and our legal interpretation skills. And our case handler team is very good at speaking to people the way that they need to be spoken to, right? I mean, we work with attorneys all the time who they respond very well to certain ways of talking to them and certain ways of using logic where other attorneys might not respond to that. So one of the things that ChatGPT is not great at is tailoring how it speaks based on who it's speaking to. Right. I mean, it can give you information, and I don't want to say it's always correct information, but ChatGPT can do a negotiation, right? I mean, if your idea of doing a negotiation is just saying, how about this amount? No. Okay, how about this amount? No. Sure, it's easy to do. But where Phia shines and where I think AI really can't compete, at least for the time being, is getting on the level with people and, really having those people skills and using judgment to know what you need to say and when you need to say it.
I'm glad you brought that up. I have
Please.
to bring an example that comes to my mind. And I had a case, it was a pretty tragic case where we had a minor child who passed away as a result of a motor vehicle wreck. And they had not retained an attorney. And I reached out to this mother who recently lost her child to talk to her about if she's going to pursue any claims. And that is a very difficult, very gentle conversation that I do not believe AI would be able to have through letters or through anything other than that human touch. So I do think it's very important that we don't forget that we are dealing with people, and people deal with people much better than just in a situation where we send out a form and ask if they're going to pursue subrogation and or reimbursement. So I do think that's very important that we keep that in mind, that we are dealing with people.
Yeah, and I think that there's definitely a role for AI in this process as everything else, but at this point we're still in a place where we need a lot of human oversight and judgment, right? I mean, AI can go a long way to informing what people say and sort of the ideas behind what people say, but I do not think we're at a stage yet where AI can actually replace the human touch that subrogation needs. And some of you might be coming into this thinking, well, we see people doing subro, it's very robotic, and, robots do robotic stuff very well. It shouldn't be robotic. If whoever's doing your subro is doing it robotically, you should call Phia, because, that's not the optimal approach that we have found. And personally, I'm a bit of a techie, and I'm very, very excited to see where AI goes next. I can't wait. And I'm so excited to be alive at this time in history and get to use it. And I'm so excited to see where Phia's business can go because of it, and how it can help us expand and how it can help our industry thrive. And Subro is no exception. I love Cindy. I think she's awesome. But I am excited for a day when we can replace her job with AI. No, I'm totally kidding. totally kidding, Cindy. But yeah, I think that's probably all there is to say on this at the moment. I hope that we'll have some updates and be able to tell you some more cool stuff soon. But on behalf of myself, John Jablon, and Cindy Merrell, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you soon. Thanks.
Thank you.